there. So in our last lecture, we had a guest lecturer coming in to talk about GMO foods and food sustainability. So today I decided to do a vlog just on GMO foods and see what the impacts of GMO foods are, the risks and the benefits of it. So just like what the guest lecturer has mentioned, by 2050 there will be 9.3 billion people in the world. That means there's a 3 billion increase in less than 50 years. And I thought that the chart that he showed was incredibly interesting because back in human history, we've never changed the food production rate, and all of a sudden we're expected to grow our food production rate exponentially in order to meet the future population demand. Unfortunately, the human population and cropland isn't evenly distributed. So for instance, in China, they have 20 to 25% of the world's total population. However, they only have 1.4% of the world's productive land. This situation is further aggravated by diminishing cropland due to soil erosion, fewer renewable resources, less water, and a reduced population working the land. Aside from that, and generally speaking, the world's consumption habits have led to climate change, and climate change can radically alter rainfall patterns, and that's going to require the migration of people and a shift in agricultural practices. Now let's talk about some of the benefits of these GMO crops. First off, GMO crops are incredibly resistant to weeds, pests, and other diseases, leading to higher production yields, more efficient use of land, and maybe a reduction in food prices, which is great for feeding a huge population. There's also the claim that GMO crops can reduce our environmental footprint. So globally, they say that GMO crops have reduced pesticide use by 9%, which is 975 million pounds, and that's from 1996 to 2011. It also increases nutritional value. So according to the World Health Organization, 100 to 140 million children suffer from vitamin A deficiency each year. About 500,000 of those children would lose their sight every year, and half of those children would die within a year of losing their sight. So some of these scientists, they've modified the typical white rice to include beta-carotene, which is a potential solution to this vitamin A deficiency. And lastly, it increases the shelf life of food, which is what consumers want. So even though there are quite some benefits to using GMO crops, there are people out there saying that we shouldn't be using them because of the risks associated with GMO crops. Let's take a look at some of them. So many of these GMO crops, they're either herbicide tolerant or they're pesticide producing. Sometimes they're both. So these GMO crops, they're pesticide producing. They're made to kill specific pests. However, they are toxic to other non-target species, and they're definitely toxic to beneficial insects as well. So species like the monarch butterfly, the green lacewings, and even honeybees, they're affected because their behavior and their learning performance is being affected. And that affects the ecodiversity and the ecosystem. In fact, a study that was conducted by the British government showed that there was 24% less butterflies as a result of the introduction of genetically engineered canola. That's because there were less weed flowers and hence nectar for these butterflies to feed on. There were also less seeds for the birds to feed on. It is also a threat to the soil ecosystem as well because these toxins that the GMO crops secrete gets released into the soil. And if it can get released into the soil, obviously it can get released into the waterways as well. And that would be a threat to the aquatic life. In fact, some studies have shown that frog eggs and farmland birds have been affected. There's also the threat of swapping one pest for another. Several studies have shown that just because a GMO crop got rid of one type of pest, it doesn't mean that another pest wouldn't come along and fill in that void. So as we can see, manipulating the plant and insect interaction has huge and compound effects on the whole ecosystem. And the thing is, do we really want to take a risk on that? Because once we release these GMO organisms into the ecosystem, you can't really take it back. It's not something that you could undo. What's interesting is that pesticides are required to be tested for 2 years prior to an European approval. However, the average safety test for a GMO crop is only 28 days. And back to the argument that GMO crops may be more environmentally friendly because they use less pesticides. Some real-life examples have shown that that is not the case. So there's a group of GMO crops called the Roundup Ready crops, and they were introduced on a large scale in USA and South America. So the thing is, these herbicide crops, they've made the weeds increasingly tolerant to herbicides, and as a result of that, there are more people using additional herbicides and additional pesticides to control these super weeds. Additionally, GMO crops have significant health implications as well. When GMO peas were being fed to mice, it caused the mice to have allergenic reactions, and on top of that, it caused the mice to be sensitive to other food allergies as well. And finally, GMO crops can lead to decreased antibiotic efficacy. So a study that's been conducted by the Iowa State University found that these GMO crops make us more resistant to the actual antibiotic drugs. That's because some GMO crops, they have antibiotic features built into them. So that makes them resistant to diseases or other viruses. And when we ingest them, these antibiotic makers remain in our body. And what happens is that it makes the actual antibiotic medications less effective. So the university is warning people to decrease their exposure to regular antibiotics and ingesting these GMOs because it is decreasing the effectiveness of antibiotic drugs in the world. Actually, with all of these significant health consequences and with all of these results that have been shown by all of these studies, I'm actually still quite surprised that a lot of people are still supporting GMOs. And I get it, we definitely need GMOs in the future because we have so many people in the world to feed. However, is it worth it? Because there's such huge health and environmental risk, and I don't think the benefits outweigh the negatives right here. In fact, I think that there are too many negatives in this situation. We definitely have to explore other ways in order for us to sustain the population. But in my opinion, I don't think that GMOs are the answer to sustain this population of ours. And that's the end of my vlog. So I hope that you enjoyed it. Stay awesome, and I'll see you the next round. Bye.